Hello YouTube, what's going on? This is Epic Bigbird. I am back with some more Rome 2 commentary. And in this battle I am taking a Roman all infantry build against another Roman faction here. And I have the video in fast forward right now because this is a really long battle. We have to try and conserve some time here, guys. So I will get into unit compositions and we will get right into this battle. Real quick, you can see my opponent has some cavalry already and he's gonna start mobilizing them around my flanks, starting to harass me. So that's gonna be a really good move on his part right away. Anyways, my infantry build today, my front line here is 4 Hastati units flanked on each side by 2 first cohort for morale. Behind them I have 5 Principes and 1 Praetorian Guard in the center as kind of like my second line of infantry. And then my back line is composed of 4 auxiliary infantry flanked by 2 Triarii, and then my Legatus General. And my opponent here has a cavalry contingent here. He's got a legionary cavalry and an equites on my right flank, and he has 2 more legionary cav on my left. And he's trying to assault my general right now with his cavalry, which honestly probably isn't a good decision. You can see here I get him pinned up against my Triarii early in the fight, but here he is going to get good cavalry engagement with my general, and I'm busy over here managing his infantry line because I can see it approaching. My opponent's doing a good job of being really aggressive, but here I do get some good javelin throws into his Evocati cohort. So anyways, his first line is going to be mostly Evocati cohort, and then so he has 4 Evocati cohort, he has 3 Hastati backing them up, and then he has 2 legionary cohort flanking his second line of Hastati. And then he also has 1 more legionary cohort in reserve behind his line of Hastati, which are flanked by 2 auxiliary infantry to protect his rear from cavalry. But we can see that he doesn't really need that here. And so yes, my opponent's being very diligent in attacking my general, but I'm doing the best I can to screen my auxiliary spear units and just trying to pin down his cavalry in these engagements and kill them with my spears as quick as possible. And you can see here my opponent makes a bold move and attacks my general with his cavalry, even in the midst of all these spears. So what I'm going to try and do is I'm actually going to leave my general in there, which is honestly not a good decision. And I'm going to try and mobilize my spears around the flank so I can pin these cavalry so they can't retreat. And you can see I managed to rout his equites, but my opponent's doing a great job of pulling out of the fight and going right for my infantry. So if we take a look at the infantry engagement, my first line of Hastati are kind of engaged right here, and they are gonna, sorry about that, they're gonna lose against his Evocati cohort, hands down. Down here on the flanks I have 2 Principe, a first cohort in the center, and a Triarii and auxiliary infantry down here to try and support them to defend against these cavalry strikes. But my opponent's doing a good job of moving out of maneuvering around my spear units. But down here you can see I've managed to pin 2 of his equites against the backs of my Hastati, and that's going to cause massive casualties to them as they try to retreat. So yeah, he has 2 equites there, guys. Sorry, I must have missed one of them. But yeah, you can see here my opponent taking a charge into my Triarii with his legionary cav. That's not going to be the best decision for him. And here again, he's gets stuck on some of my auxiliary infantry here, and that's going to be really good. I'm going to force him to retreat out of this fight. So over here you can see I've engaged his own Hastati and Evocati cohort with more of my Hastati. Down here I have a flanking force because I have an infantry advantage right now, and he's only got a legionary cohort and auxiliary infantry down here to stop my Principes. So a legionary cohort will beat my Principes, but auxiliary infantry definitely will not. So what I'm going to do is to guard against this flank and make sure that we secure the flank. I'm going to use my superior infantry to fend off against his cavalry as well. This is my Praetorian Guard, and this is honestly a mistake. I should have used my Principes or something else and used my Praetorian Guard to kill this legionary cohort. But you can see here my opponent's still picking with his cavalry, trying to find decisive hammer and anvils. The only issue with his cavalry is that it's a melee cav, and it's not very powerful on the charge. It's not going to be inflicting a lot of damage on these charges. And every time he commits to the fight, it gives my spear units time to kind of get into his cavalry's face and try to get some kills. So if we take a look right now, though, we can see my left flank here is collapsing. It's simply not holding up. He's got superior sword units in the area. I have spear units to support it right now, but he doesn't really need his cavalry in this area because his sword units are going to easily win this contest. Over here, I have a much higher chance of actually succeeding in combat, so I'm actually going to make the decision right now I kind of basically decide I'm going to cut my losses, and I'm going to mobilize my spear units over here and try and make sure that I can wrap up this flank with as little casualties as possible. I make this decision for a couple of reasons. One, I still have a lot of my sword infantry committed over here, and for the most part in favorable engagements. Two, my Praetorian Guard is now engaged in this combat, and I need to ensure that I keep them protected so that they can be as cost effective as possible as we head into the late game. Because if I have my Praetorians in the late game, my opponent's going to have a very hard time countering them. This is what I find interesting about me and my opponent's battle today, was how different our infantry corps builds were, as well as our mobility strategies. My opponent all around brought a more superior infantry corps. I would say, like, pound for pound, his units were superior to my own, but what gave me an edge in the infantry fight was I had, I believe, 1 or 2 more infantry units than he did, not counting my spear units. And I'm not going to count my spear units for one reason, and it's because I brought them for the sole purpose of countering his cavalry. So I don't want to commit them to an infantry fight unless I have to. And you can see here, I'm using my Principes to ward off his general to try and get a javelin throw, and then also I'm just trying to harass his cavalry and make sure that they're as cost effective as I can make them. Here I make him pay for a little bit of a micro error. And at this stage of the battle, it's also good to know that I have basically all of my units taken off formation attack. I want my units pushing and killing as fast as possible, and I don't want them holding. Over here, over here I have my Triarii in formation because I want them to last as long as possible down here. I want to delay this fight as long as possible while I'm continuing to wrap up this big chunk of units here. And you can see here my opponent still hovering around with his cavalry, but the problem is my spear units now are basically just boxing him out, and he doesn't have shock cavalry to simply charge through them. So he's gonna mobilize his cavalry back over to this to my left flank and just help wrap that fight up. But you can see here, guys, that this fight is oh, sorry about that, guys. I'm gonna bump this into fast forward for a little bit here, though, guys. You can see this is how this is gonna play out in the end game here. My machine is not the best, so I have to try and conserve time here. And we can still see his cavalry kind of roaming in the back lines here, trying to get at my sword corps here, but he's just not going to have any luck getting to try and save his last set of Evocati here. You can see now as his left crumbles, my left crumbles. You can see here my Triarii holding out quite valiantly, though, in this fight down here, so that this is excellent for me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start pulling back my units to the hill so I can rest my men. And you can see my opponent over here beginning to reform his own men. So yeah, we can see now that we're gonna set up for the late game, and we'll see how that goes. So going into the late game, we'll see if I lose this auxiliary infantry or not. Looks like he's gonna hold on. Alright, so going into the late game, my opponent has a legionary cohort, 2 legionary cohort, 1 which is at about quarter strength, and 1 which is at which is quite healthy actually. He then also has 1 avocado cohort at about quarter strength, and then he has a Hastati at about quarter strength. He has a legionary cav which is slightly over half strength, and his general is still alive in the late game. So this is going to be one big advantage that my opponent holds over me, is the fact that his general is still alive. But let's take a look at my army. So again, my opponent still holds a mobility edge, which is dangerous right now, but I'm feeling pretty confident in my positioning right now. So I have a Praetorian Guard with 2 chevrons, and it's still it's at about half strength, a little bit over half strength, so it's going to be very, very potent. I have a Triari unit which is only down 20 men. I have a Principe over here which is healthy, completely fresh. Auxiliary infantry down here with 36 units left. I have an auxiliary unit down here with 70 units left. And then I also have another Principe with 88 units and 2 more auxiliary units with quite healthy stats. So in my opinion, this is pretty much wrapped up for me already. All I have to do is make sure that I protect my Praetorian Guard's rear, and this fight's over with, because he has no answer to my Praetorian Guard at this point in the battle. So but let's see how this plays out. You never know what happens. So what I need to make sure I'm aware of is his legionary cav. That's what's going to be most potent and most dangerous that he still has right now. And what he's going to want to be looking to do, ideally, like I said already, is get behind my infantry line and land some decisive hammer and anvil strikes on my heavy infantry. And if you look at the balance of power bar, it still says that my opponent still has somewhat of a chance here. So, but you can see here my opponent's starting to kite away. I'm not sure why. I feel like he should have just gone ahead and accepted the fight. So I'm going to have to pursue him. And he is going to turn around, but you can see here his cavalry going around the flanks. This is I like the idea here, but the thing is the way I am approaching, it's not going to have too much success. You can see here, I get an auxiliary infantry in his way. He is going to plow right over it, and then he's going to do a nice job of pulling through my unit. However, he does not land a hammer and anvil strike, which is what he really should have done. That's what he needed. My Praetorian Guard going in for a charge. And what I'm going to do with my spear infantry again is just simply box out his cavalry, prevent him from being able to support his infantry units. And you can see his center is starting to waver against the might of my Praetorians. And you can see here my opponent's getting desperate. He needs to land a hammer and anvil strike, so he's going to try and thread this gap with his general, and he actually does do a really nice job and gets himself in behind my units and lands a hammer and anvil blow. And then for some reason my auxiliary infantry are very, very late in responding, and he actually threads the gap right back out. So that's really good micro on my opponent's part. But over here, not so much luck. He gets his legionary cav engaged up with some Triari. His center routes, and I'm going to swing my Praetorian to the right to wrap up his legionary cohort. And the rest of these units should not be lasting much longer due to army losses at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and drop the banners for you guys. So a couple things that I think worked in this battle. So one of the reasons why I chose to bring this build today was I actually went up against an opponent who fielded an army that didn't have any cavalry, and I made the claim that I felt that his army was plausible. He just mismicroed his spears, in my own opinion. So I really wanted to try and bring an army without any cavalry to see if I could actually pull off my claim. And in this battle, you can see that I do manage to pull that off. But there are a couple things that we need to keep in mind with my build today. One of the things is I was facing Rome, and cavalry is not Rome's strong suit. They do have decent cavalry. As far as shock cavalry goes, though, I knew going into the fight I was not going to have to deal with heavy shock cav. So I think that a build like this would really suffer against factions with strong shock cavalry, so Cataphract would have no problem punching through these spear units. Come on. Sorry about my computer, guys. It's been acting up really weird lately. But on it, also, I also think if my opponent would have possibly brought skirmishers instead of cavalry, that would have been a better counter to my build. Because I didn't have the mobility to chase down his skirmishers. His skirmishers would have been able to just simply retreat and fall back and retreat and fall back and continue to fire. However, my opponent probably was expecting me to bring some cavalry because I would say this wasn't a very orthodox build. However, it worked. I was able to keep my spear units for the most part where I needed them to. And my sword units basically won the war of attrition. So yeah, that's really how I won this victory today, guys, and I thought it was interesting, and I think it's has some good information here to keep in mind. So let's take a look at some units who did really well. My spear units more or less doing okay up here. 42 isn't too great, but yeah, 42, 48, and 48 aren't too great, but I use them solely for really defending against these cavalry. So in the end, definitely necessity, definitely worth the denarii to bring. My Triarii units down here doing quite well. This is 107 kills. This is probably mostly against cavalry as well. This unit with 68 kills, this was the unit that I had engaged with sword units, and 68 kills on a Triarii against Roman sword units is actually pretty respectable in my opinion, so that's good. 231 on this Principe is amazing. That's awesome. 116 is good. 145 is good. 215 on my Praetorian Guard is good. And I had an experienced chevron on it when going into the battle, so it gained 2 experienced chevrons in the battle, which is awesome. Definitely carried its weight, and I would say it was probably the decisive element in my army. So very interesting use of elite units in my opinion. And then 139 on this Hastati is actually very respectable. I'd like to see how that unit pulled that off actually, because I feel like I didn't manage my Hastati very well. Well, my first cohort as well did not do as well as I had hoped they would. So, and then my opponent over here getting good numbers. All of his Avocati cohort paid for themselves. Even his Hastati did well, and his most of his legionary cohort did very well too, but the only thing was I just simply had more units than he did, and I was able to protect my backlines for the most part. Very well fought battle. Good game to my opponent, and thank you guys so much for checking out the vid. Hope you liked it. Please rate, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Really sorry for the laggy video content on this one, guys. It's simply a big video, and there's not much I can do right now at this time in my life about that. So hopefully sometime soon in the future I'll get that fixed for you, but until then, this is all I have for you. So thank you guys again. This has been Epic Bigbird, signing off.